Imagine for a moment a world where clarity isn't found in, endless chatter, but in deep silence, where being alone isn't just about solitude, but maybe about self-protect, finding real. It's kind of a curious thing when you think about it. So many really intelligent people through history, thinkers, inventors, artists, philosophers, they often seem to prefer being alone. For them, social life wasn't always a pleasure. Sometimes, well, it felt more like a disturbance. So today, we're taking a deep dive into this exact. We're drawing heavily on Arthur Schopenhauer's pretty provocative insight. He had this belief that for many intelligent people, social life isn't just inconvenient. It can actually be, well, almost unbearable.
And that's exactly what we want to explore. We're going to try and step inside the mind of Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, famous for his sharp pessimism maybe, but also these incredibly insightful views on consciousness, on society. Our mission here really is to unpack the connection he saw, intelligence, solitude, and this idea of inner freedom.
Right. And hopefully by the end of our chat, we can maybe shed light on a powerful truth, something that might just change how you view your own need for quiet, for space, for maybe deeper connection. It's not just a quirk. Perhaps it's something more fundamental.
Well, Schopenhauer's idea of intelligence, it went way beyond just like logic or having a good memory. For him, it was more about a heightened perception, an acute, sometimes almost painfully clear awareness of reality. The more aware you become, the more you start seeing the subtle stuff, things most people miss or, frankly, choose to ignore.
Like what sort of things?
Well, like the shallow foundations of small talk, or the ego games that play out in social setting, or even the sort of unconscious cruelties hidden beneath everyday social expectations. This awareness, it's a gift, sure, but Schopenhauer felt it could also feel like a bit of a quiet nightmare.
That's a really striking phrase, painful awareness. It makes me think, if you're someone who thinks deeply, you've probably felt that weird feeling, being in a packed room, loads of people around, but your mind is just somewhere else entirely, observing, processing, kind of detached from all the noise, almost like you're studying the scenes.
Exactly.
So if this awareness can feel like a nightmare, did Schopenhauer offer any way to deal with that, to navigate it?
He did, though his solution was pretty radical. He famously wrote something like, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." What he was getting at is, the deeper you think, the more fundamental questions pop up about, well, everything. And the more questions you ask, the less satisfied you are with the easy answers or, superficial chat. So for him, the way to deal with the nightmare was basically to withdraw from the sources of that superficiality.
Okay. So it's not about arrogance then, not feeling superior. It's more like a fundamental mismatch in values, maybe. Like for really intelligent people, those daily social things, the chit-chat, the gossip, the politeness, they just feel like a massive drain of mental energy.
Precisely.
Not because they look down on it, but because their inner world just craves something else entirely. Truth, depth, authenticity, like a hunger that most casual interactions just, they can't satisfy it.
Exactly. And for minds like that, Schopenhauer argued, solitude isn't isolation at all. It's restoration. It's absolutely vital. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom." It's not about being stuck up. It's about protecting the quality, the integrity of your own thoughts. He saw the mind as this delicate instrument, It plays beautifully in silence, but his music just gets completely drowned out by noise.
That really resonates. I mean, I've often felt that exact way. It's like you experience the world with this extra sensitivity, intellectually and emotionally. Pick up on the contradictions, the insincerity, the subtle manipulations, and honestly, it's exhausting. The social world, with all its performance and posturing, it starts to feel like a stage where you just don't want to act more. Even when you're there, smiling and nodding, inside you're often just retreating, observing patterns maybe, or just waiting for that moment you can finally be alone.
You said this isn't misanthropy, it's a misalignment. How does society kind of make that misalignment worse for deep thinkers?
Well, that's a key point because, let's face it, society often favors the loud, not necessarily the wise.
Yeah.
It tends to reward fitting in over being original, distraction over deep thought. So typical social life just isn't really designed for the deep think. It demands energy, but doesn't offer much depth. It asks for presence, not sincerity, performance without real.
Schopenhauer pointed out that being around people often means absorbing their stuff, their emotions, expectations, their noise. For an intelligent person, that can feel like carrying weights that aren't even yours. So the solitude they crave isn't really about escaping other people. It's about returning to themselves, finding that authentic core again.
And it wasn't just Schopenhauer saying this, right? Carl Jung, the psychologist, he observed something similar. He noted that the more introspective someone is, the more likely they are to pull back from what he called the collective noise. For Jung, like Schopenhauer, the inner life just held so much more meaning than the outer performance.
Absolutely.
Thinking about that, how many times have you, personally, said yes to some social thing only to regret it halfway through? Not because the people were bad, but your mind was just screaming for quiet. Books, ideas, music, or just reflection. That feeling, that pull inward, it isn't weakness. It's actually profound self-awareness.
Schopenhauer took it even further. He warned that constant socializing actually dilutes the self. He believed that too much company pulls us away from our own essence, fills us up with other people's thoughts, opinions, desires, just noise. To live authentically, he argued, you absolutely have to cultivate what he called voluntary solitude. It's not about being lonely because you're rejected. It's about choosing solitude consciously for its richness, for its clarity.
Which is such a radical idea, isn't it? Especially today when being social is often seen as the benchmark for being healthy or successful. But it feels like modern research is kind of catching up to what Schopenhauer sensed intuitively. You see psychological studies suggesting highly intelligent people often report lower life satisfaction if they're forced to socialize like everyone else.
That's right.
They don't thrive on constant connection. They thrive on selective, meaningful depth. So if you've ever been told, oh, you're too quiet, or you should get out more, maybe the real question isn't about, maybe it's about the kind of connection being offered. Does it actually nourish you or does it just drain you?
And when Schopenhauer championed solitude, he wasn't just talking from his own maybe reclusive perspective. He was pointing to a pattern he saw throughout across different fields. Think about the really great minds, Socrates, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla. These weren't typically the life and soul of the party, were they?
No.
They were often seekers of silence. Why? Because solitude provides that crucial space, not just physical space, but mental, where thoughts can stretch out, ideas can properly, consciousness can deepen. For them, silence wasn't empty. It was like the canvas for their greatest work.
That makes complete sense. Schopenhauer talked about how most people are driven by what he called the will to live, which for anyone unfamiliar is sort of this blind, relentless, instinctive drive for survival, pleasure, distraction, having kids.
The basic stuff of life, yeah.
And he argued that most social activity kind of revolves around satisfying these drives without really questioning them. But the truly intelligent person, they don't just live on autopilot. They analyze, they reflect. They might even rebel against those ingrained patterns. They aren't just content being here. They want to understand why they're here, how to live authentically. And, well, my gut feeling is that kind of deep existential questioning isn't exactly welcome at most cocktail parties, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. It's often discouraged, or you just get blank stares. And that's exactly why intelligent people can get so weary of conversations about, the latest trends, gossip, surface stuff. It's not that those things are inherently bad, but for a mind craving substance, they're just insufficient. Have you ever left a conversation feeling like mentally hungrier than when you started?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
That's that ache. The intelligent mind starving for depth. Schopenhauer was convinced that hunger just cannot be satisfied in crowded rooms. It needs feeding through books, long walks alone, music, deep reflection, and often solitude. He felt a mind constantly battered by social noise loses its ability for real philosophical depth.
And this is where it gets really interesting, seeing how modern psychology seems to echo these ideas from centuries ago. You've got research from places like Yale and the London School of Economics showing that people with higher intelligence often report wanting less general social interaction.
Right, less quantity.
It's not that they're antisocial, it's just that their need for stimulation is met internally. Their imagination, their curiosity, the conversations they have in their own head, it's often richer than what's on offer outside. Carl Jung also pointed out that the introverted, intuitive type, which often overlaps with high intelligence, doesn't seek quantity in relationships. They crave quality.
Deep quality.
They'd much rather have 2 hours of intense, meaningful conversation with one person than mingle superficially with 20. So how do they find that quality in a world that often
Well, the key is understanding that intelligent solitude isn't about rejecting people. It's about aligning with yourself. And the environments that help that align, they tend to be slow, quiet, reflective. Think libraries, maybe walking in nature, a focused creative studio, or sometimes just a silent room where you can truly be. These are like the sacred spaces for the intelligent mind.
Yeah.
In those spaces, the mind is free. It can wander, question, build connections that are just impossible amid the noise of typical social life. They're not avoiding people, really. They're curating their mental environment for optimal thinking.
And yet society often looks at this preference and labels it, mythologizes it. We get told constantly extroversion is healthy, being social means you're successful, being alone is weird, maybe even a bit sad. But Schopenhauer just flipped that completely on its head. He believed the more someone needs external stimulation to feel okay, the emptier their inner world probably is. He wrote that famous line, "Ordinary people merely think how they shall spend their time. A man of talent tries." So intelligent people aren't afraid of boredom. They kind of transcend it. They're seeking meaning. And meaning, like you said, isn't usually found at a party. It's discovered alone. Often painfully, maybe, but always profound.
And let's be clear, this doesn't mean intelligent people have no relationship. That's a common misunderstanding. Often their relationships are fewer, but they're much deep, much more intense. They look for people who challenge them, who question things alongside them, who aren't afraid of uncomfortable. The bond is over shared depth, not just shared noise or activity. And this is where the danger of shallow relationships comes in. Schopenhauer warned, mediocrity loves company. The average seeks the average. For someone highly intelligent, forcing themselves into social groups just out of obligation or to conform, it can actually become toxic. It pulls them away from their own deeper path.
It makes me think, have you ever been in a situation, maybe a social gathering, where you found yourself kind of dumbing down how you speak just to fit in, or holding back your real thoughts because you just knew they wouldn't land, they'd be misunderstood, maybe even mocked?
Oh, absolutely. That's a classic feeling.
That's exactly how we're describing. To protect that inner that off has to be willing to walk. And that walk, even if solid off kind of that crowd, Friedrich Nietzsche, into all sounds like long.
It takes enormous courage. And it leads to a fundamental question you have to ask yourself. Is your solitude a sign of sadness, or is it a sign of sovereignty? When you choose to be alone, not because you're pushed away, but because you're aligning with something deep inside, that's an act of profound philosophical integrity. You're basically saying, I value my mind. I value depth more than I value fleeting distraction. And maybe, like Schopenhauer suggested, you've just realized that true companionship, that real meeting of mind, is incredibly rare. And until you find it, well, your own company, your own inner world is actually more than enough where you thrive.
And this brings us to a really interesting paradox that Schopenhauer hinted at. This idea that solitude for the intelligent mind isn't yield from noise. It can also be a vessel for a very rare, very specific kind of connection. Intelligent people might pull back from the superficial social scene, but they often have this deeper capacity for connection, a profound capacity. But the connection they crave isn't casual, it feels almost sacred. Behind the quiet exterior, there's often not for crowd, not for popularity, genuine.
And that kind of connection is incredibly rare. That's why they often find themselves alone. It's not a dislike of people per se. It's that shallow company just makes the feeling of isolation even worse. We see hints of this in psychology and neuroscience too. Intelligent people seem to process relationships differently. They're often more sensitive to emotional nuances, quick to spot inconsistencies, more deeply affected by inauthenticity. So what feels like a harmless chat to most might leave them feeling drained or even slightly betrayed if they sense a lack of realness. That's why they gravitate towards those few people who speak the same language, emotionally and intellectually. Carl Jung had a beautiful phrase for it, the meeting of two souls. He said, when that happens, if there is any reaction, both are transformed. And for intelligent individuals, that transformation, that shared depth, that's the real goal.
That helps clear up a common misconception, doesn't it? That being introverted or liking solitude means you're emotionally detached. Often it seems the opposite is true. Intelligent people might feel more intensely, not less, but they channel those feelings inward into thought, creativity, introspection, which explains maybe why so many great artists and thinkers lived somewhat isolated lives, like Emily Dickinson, writing thousands of poems but rarely out, or Kafka, whose inner world meant. If their inner world is that rich, how do those internal conversations stack up against external ones for nerd?
Well, for these individuals, solitude isn't the absence of connection, it's more like it's refined. In solitude, they forge incredibly deep relationships with ideas, with art, with memory, with visions for the future. They could be sitting alone in a room for hours, but in their mind, they're deep in conversation with Schopenhauer or Jung or wrestling with the universe itself. And sometimes, honestly, those internal dialogues are far more stimulating, more profound than anything happening around a dinner table. They're actively creating and discovering within.
And that ties directly into creativity, too. Solitude really is like a crucible for innovation. It gives you that mental space for original thought, unfiltered by groupthink or social pressure. Intelligent people often hit that flow state when they're alone, that intense focus where time just melts away. Albert Einstein famously said, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." And it's not just anecdotes. Studies actually show solitude boosts both divergent thinking, coming up with lots of different ideas, and convergent thinking, honing in on the best, both crucial for creativity.
But, and this is really important, we have to acknowledge that solitude isn't without potential downside. If it's unchecked, it absolutely can become a prison rather than a sanctuary. Intelligent people living so vividly in their minds can sometimes get trapped in overthinking, or fall into melancholy, or feel deeply alienated.
Right, the dark side.
Exactly. This is where emotional intelligence becomes so critical. True self-awareness isn't just about knowing your thoughts. It's understanding your feelings, your needs, your limit. Look at Schopenhauer himself. For all his praise of solitude, he personally struggled with bitterness, with existential despair. It highlights that potential shadow of high intelligence. You see the world's flaws, society's illusions, maybe even life's cruelties, with painful clarity. And without strong emotional grounding, that sharpness can become, well, unbearable.
That's such a vital point. It's not about advocating total isolation. So what kind of connection do intelligent individuals really seek? The kind that balances that clarity with emotional wisdom.
I think they seek resonance more than entertainment. They crave conversations where the masks come off, where people are willing to be honest, curious, vulnerable. They value silence that's comfortable, not awkward. Relationships that respect their need for inner space, not demand they fill it constantly. And when they find that whether it's in a friendship, a partnership, or even just deeply connecting with art or an idea, they absolutely come alive. That kind of deep connection nourishes them far more than 100 superficial interactions ever.
But it is a harder path, isn't it? Because let's be honest, the world often feels like it's built for speed, for distraction, for the surface level.
It really does.
So intelligent individuals often feel like they're swimming against the tide, consistently choosing reflection over reaction, meaning over popularity, solitude over noise. And yet, in making those choices, they often discover something most people miss, this profound inner freedom. Because when you stop looking for validation from the crowd, you become your own compass. When you stop fearing silence, you start hearing your own true voice. When you stop needing constant interaction, you begin choosing connection intentionally, meaningfully. So where is this journey ultimately? Maybe the deepest insight Schopenhauer offered. For truly intelligent minds, solitude isn't just about finding peace. It's the very forge where their greatest purpose gets. Deep intelligence isn't just for analyzing the world. It's here to transform it. And real transformation, the kind that lasts, it doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness, from introspection. It comes from facing your inner world with such clarity, such courage, that what emerges isn't just knowledge, but wisdom. It's in those quiet hours when nobody's watching, when there are no roles left to play, when the masks finally... That's when the intelligent mind confronts its raw truth. And in that moment, something incredible. The chatter fades, the false selves dissolve, and what's living is pure essence.
And that essence is exactly what the world needs. But here's the paradox. Society demands the fruits of that essence, the breakthroughs, the innovations, the insights, but it often doesn't understand the source. It can even fear it, especially when that essence starts questioning norms, poking holes in illusions, speaking uncomfortable truths. And that's why the intelligents are often, in a way, forced to walk alone. They're not here just to fit in. They're often here to pierce through the illusion. And doing that requires solitude. It demands that space to think without being manipulated, to feel without constant interruption, to imagine without ridicule. It's in that sacred, quiet space that the truly new, the truly transformative ideas are born.
And you see this pattern again and again throughout history, don't you? With the figures who really shifted human understanding. Jesus going and Buddha meditating, Isaac Newton isolating himself during the plague, Kafka writing in the dead of Beethoven composing masterful, going deaf, profoundly alone. They were alone, yes, they weren't becoming.
Becoming, exactly.
For the intelligent person, solitude isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of creation. It's the laboratory for their idea, the temple for their truth, the sanctuary where their soul can finally speak its own authentic.
Schopenhauer put it so starkly, but so beautifully. It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. And maybe that's the ultimate reframing we need. Solitude isn't lonely, it's alignment. Yeah. Social withdrawal isn't weakness, it's refinement. Distance from the world isn't exile. It's the crucial vantage point from which a new world can be envisioned, a new path can be forged.
And yeah, let's acknowledge, journey isn't a genuine courage down. It takes strength, silence. It takes a kind of faith to believe that your inner life, but maybe most of all, the wisdom to awake to the silence. So maybe quiet. Please don't apologize. Try not. Because in a world that's constantly out to go, might solid, you recall your truest sense of self.
And remember, history shows us it's often the quietest minds that end up shaping the loudest, most lasting legacy. The world probably doesn't need more noise right now. It needs more clarity, more courage, more people willing to walk that path alone for a while so that maybe, eventually, others can find their way too.
Maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of self-love is having the courage to embrace the silence within you and finally allowing your deepest purpose to speak.